everyone. Welcome back to another week here at Just Gay Stuff Podcast. I am Jess.
And I'm Lauren.
And I am really excited to be recording with you today because it has been another big week and I feel like I have hardly seen you because I've been out busy, you've been out busy, you've been off into Woomba for work.
Yeah.
I feel like every week has been really hectic at the moment.
This weekend especially, I felt like I haven't had a weekend. You've literally just woken me up from a nap to record this episode for our, I was going to say fans, but I don't know if that's the right word. Listeners?
Definitely not fans. Yeah, listeners. And it's a Sunday, so it is a slower day for us. It is a day off, but it doesn't really feel like that.
No, that's what I mean. Like I haven't had a weekend. I've worked all weekend essentially. And I know that's your normal week days.
But it's funny because even on a day off, when you're an adult, I'm like, when was the last time you actually had a day off that was a day off?
We don't even have kids yet, and that's the conversation that we're having.
But I feel like the last day off that I did something that was completely for me or that I could just literally do nothing as an adult, I feel was like just out of high school.
I can't even think. Yeah.
It's like all that responsibility ago, you know what I mean?
That's the problem.
Yeah.
People lie to you
They
about
do.
getting older.
Nobody tells you what it's really like in the real world.
They're like, oh, here's all the bunch of responsibilities that you have. They only tell you the fun parts.
Yeah, I have some bills.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, it's good to be back in the podcast lab and we're here to talk about a fun topic today.
Ooh.
It's actually been a long time coming and I suppose the fact that we're watching a very particular TV show at the moment where this particular topic is absolutely rife helps bring it to the forefront.
Well, I wonder what we're talking about today.
This week, we're talking about queer baiting.
Oh, I didn't know you were going to go into song. I was not ready.
I did it because I was like, oh, the let's talk about sex baby thing kind of really works with it.
It fits.
It does.
Fits with the whole vibe of the thing. Queer baiting. Okay, that makes sense with the show that we're watching right now.
So the episode this week, we're talking about queer baiting. So we've all been there, right? Like we've all been queer baited before. Yep.
Me constantly right now.
Well, if you're sitting there going, what the hell are they talking about? What is queer baiting? Do I put a queer person on a fishing line and try and catch a fish? No, that is not what it is.
The visual I just had right now is insane.
Also, people on dating profiles need to stop posing with fish. Quick side note there.
That was a side note. I feel like that's a very specific niche for the cis straight man.
But I want to just put a quick PSA. No one is impressed by your catch. You're supposed to be the catch. And ironically, most people holding a catch are not a catch. So I digress.
Wow. I'd never thought about it that way, but yeah.
It's stupid. It's dumb. I don't even know. Like one thing I am very thankful for being a lesbian is like you hardly ever go onto a queer dating profile and see a fellow lesbian holding a fish.
Imagine if you saw that. Imagine if you saw queer people posing the way that straight cis people pose on a dating app.
Maybe. Well, there's a lot of cats, though, on lesbian profiles.
True.
They just didn't catch them.
Well, you don't know.
Good at catching pussy. I don't know. If they were, would they be dating on the profiles? I don't know.
Who knows?
Well, if you are sitting there wondering what the hell queer baiting is, well, queer baiting is a tactic that creators use to attract a certain audience. Us queers, in case that wasn't clear before, without actually delivering any actual form of queer content. And there are a few ways that we see this in books, on TV, in movies.
And it's the most frustrating thing ever.
It really is. It really is. The first is the queer coded character. So let's say there's a character that looks like you'd expect a stereotypical lesbian to look like. Has many of the traits, maybe even wears a carabiner and has some cargo pants on. But the sexuality is never explicitly stated or confirmed. Does any character come to mind for you?
I just thought of this. I know you asked me this before we recorded, but I couldn't think of it, but now I can. You know, I think her name's Haley from Stick It.
Oh, yeah. Missy Peregrine's character in Stick It. Yeah. Total stereotypical lesbian.
Yeah.
But wasn't a lesbian.
No.
So there you go. There's the first one. I weirdly think of Melissa Joan Hart in Sabrina, the Teenage Witch.
Oh.
Because, like, besides her mad crush for Harvey, she had all the serious makings of a raging lesbian.
To be fair, Harvey's quite feminine as a male character.
I loved him. But I don't know if it was the 90s fashion or just the way she, like, held herself. But I was like, yeah, Sabrina could have totally become a lesbian.
I never thought about that, but that makes sense to me.
Also, there's a bit of homophobic shit in that show, but let's skip over that for now.
That part.
Okay, so the second is the besties that act like a couple but never become a couple.
Yep.
Which is the turmoil that we're going through currently.
Yep.
Think Becca and Chloe in the shower scene in Pitch Perfect. Tell me you weren't hoping for more.
I know I know for a fact that there's a whole fan fiction around this, and I know for a fact that Brittany Snow, who plays Chloe, put a thing on Instagram and did like all the cheeky winking stuff and led into the queer baiting.
Oh, she lent into it a lot.
Yeah, lent. Yeah, that's what I meant. Also, speaking on that, Betty and Veronica from Riverdale.
Yep, I mentioned that later.
Oh, do you?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So sometimes writers will even have intimacy shown between these best friend characters, but never commit to anything more than that.
Right.
Writers will have characters pretend to date, sleep in the same bed, as some best friends do, and even the age-old practice kissing or drunk intimacy. Can you think of some examples of this off the top of your head? Maybe the show we're watching at the moment, which is possibly the biggest queer baiting show you've ever seen in your whole fucking life.
Yes. Well, they haven't kissed and I'm very disappointed.
But they have pretended to be together.
They have pretended to be together.
And what is the show?
Rizzoli and Isles.
How many of our fellow lesbians or queers out there have watched Rizzoli and Isles and thought that it is the biggest queer bait ever?
To be fair, I had never seen it before, and then you were like, oh, we need to watch this. I feel like the whole way through us doing this podcast and our relationship, you're like, here's these queer shows that aren't actually necessarily queer, although Wentworth did have queer parts in it.
Wentworth is a banger.
Yeah. But you're like, here's this queer baiting as fuck show. Mm-hmm. And every night we watch it and I'm like, oh, got to put the lesbians on.
The lesbians that aren't real lesbians.
Yeah. And I'm like, for fuck's sake, it's so frustrating to watch because you just see their chemistry and you're just like, as if those two aren't dating.
Mm-hmm. Well, for the queer baiting generation of the 2000s, I went through some 2000s movies that we were aware of. And when I think back to the first same-sex kiss that I experienced, it was in that movie 13. I know we've touched on this a little bit before. We'll have to eventually watch it. It's only a little kiss, but still, between Evan Rachel Wood and Nikki Reed, they were two best friends. One was teaching the other how to kiss. Then there's Megan Fox and Amanda Seyfried and Jennifer's Body. Best friends that seemingly for absolutely no reason were making out in this one scene.
Oh.
Honestly, it makes zero sense to me, but I am always here for it. Then,
this one.
Sophia Bush and Brittany Snow in John Tucker Must Die. Again, a friend showing another friend how to kiss in grand detail, which I'm sure we all thoroughly enjoyed.
And again, Sophia Bush and Brittany Snow both are like, yep, we are proud to be a part of the lesbian queer baiting.
Yep. And now Sophia Bush has joined the queer community.
Yeah.
That has been really nice because, you know, I had a mad crush on
her.
her.
Join the dark side.
Well, yeah, I had a mad crush on her when she was in One Tree Hill, and I feel so blessed to be alive in the same state where Sophia Bush is queer.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It is amazing.
I never thought I'd exist in the same universe as that.
I'm trying to think of who else. That was the main one, Sophia Bush and Brittany Snow and John Tucker Must Die. That's such a great movie.
Well, all of those scenes I played on repeat for hours, more than I'd like to admit, but it was representation back in the day, and let's face it, like, we didn't have a lot of that. So we would grasp at these little straws that were given to us, right?
Yeah.
So the last kind of queer baiting is kind of like the first, but it's a character that is introduced as having a specific identity, but the writers never follow through with the potential for a storyline.
Oh.
So this is typically seen as like the gay best friend or a secondary character that never actually gets their own story arc.
Oh.
So they're there to serve some representation purposes, but their romantic and intimate relationships are never served or discussed. Do any spring to mind for you?
Oh.
I kind of think of in Will and Grace, Jack.
Yeah, true.
Because he's such an openly queer character, but you never really see him experience his own relationships. He's there for the fun. He's there for the jokes. He's there for the stereotypical gay camp guy, but you never get deeper than that.
Same as Neil in Fraser.
Niles?
Is that his name?
Yeah, but I don't know if he was explicitly queer either.
That's what I mean.
Traits. Yeah. Okay, yeah. I didn't think of that.
A lot of the younger listeners probably don't know these shows or what we're talking about.
But I'm like,
they can Google.
Yeah, through the things. The one show that I wanted to touch on that really didn't do any of the queer baiting was Friends.
Yeah, that's true. Although you can question Chandler and Joey's relationship a little bit.
Yeah, I suppose. But also the most queer Friends got was having Ross's ex-wife openly be a lesbian.
Yeah, that's true.
And that's as far as they went.
Nah, Phoebe dated a girl.
Did she?
Yeah.
Oh, missing out.
Yeah.
Okay, so the next question is, can queer baiting be problematic?
Yes.
Why do you think it can be problematic?
I think it can be problematic because, like we said, we never had representation before. It then can also lead to a false representation of what the queer people expect to see, because they're like, oh, I have a chance with this person because this is the way all queer people act and this is how this is supposed to be.
Exactly. So you've hit the nail on the head there. The most problematic things with queer baiting is that obviously it can hurt a queer audience. It can lead them on and never deliver the goods. It's like giving someone a false sense of being seen. We all know what it was like to finally see representation on TV and then have it deliver. So I'm sure we all know what it feels like to think we're going to see it, only for the writers to stop short because for reasons they don't want to upset the masses or create conflict, which we saw a lot more pre-2000s.
Yeah, and that's why it's so frustrating watching Rizzoli and Isles right now. Mm-hmm. Especially, yeah, exactly what you're saying, especially as someone who has been so openly able to see so much representation through Orange is the New Black, through Wentworth, through shows like Sex Education and
Glee
and other things, to now go back to a time where you can tell that the writers clearly have some sort of flirtatious intent or queer baiting intent for people to watch. And I think it's probably also done very cleverly in a way because it's two very strong female leads. So to make the masses watch, they're like, oh, well, let's add a little bit of a flirty flavour to it. But for me, as a queer person, that's so frustrating because you're like, they're dating, but they're not. They're not.
Yeah. It's a way for the writers, and I say this later because we get into it, but it's a way for the writers to kind of also still plead the fifth in a way.
Yeah.
Because they're getting away with this emotional intimacy that they're portraying to you very deeply. But then if someone says, oh, well, are there lesbians on that show? Your answer is no.
No, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so the second reason that it's problematic is because you're trying to capitalize on queer people becoming your fan base without actually intending on treating their storylines with understanding and education on the topic. And I feel like we see a lot of this in film and TV where we've had the lesbian death trope.
Oh, yes.
Which we will touch on in a complete episode
Different
on its
episode.
own. It really does deserve its own episode because there's a lot to delve into there. But essentially, this is where lesbian characters, especially lesbian characters, but let's say queer characters, were introduced only to be killed off or leave a few episodes in.
Yeah.
So, for example, this wasn't a death, but Alex and Marissa in the OC, if anyone has flashbacks to that classic like I do.
And you've mentioned this quite a bit on this podcast.
So they started to portray a lesbian relationship out of the little rich girl's rebellious stage. And then once she was called out for it just being a phase, she was like, oh yeah, guess it was.
Oh, no.
Then 4 episodes later, the lesbian character gets written out and no further sexuality is ever explored by the other character, which is a shame because you have a queer audience standing by, even maybe going through their own self-discovery, trying to figure themselves out, and essentially getting no answers, which then leads to the last reason why it's problematic.
Yeah.
And that is queer characters being portrayed incorrectly or in phases.
Ugh.
Like we've said before, being heavily stereotyped can create a false narrative for queer and straight audiences, which can lead to further misunderstanding and discrimination.
Yeah.
And this is where we come back to, like, say, Jack from Will and Grace. It goes back to that gay male best friend in all scenarios, always portrayed as camp, always feminine, always over the top, never has a solid love interest. All of those things lead to false representation and can lead people outside of the queer community to believe that that's all there is. And even some of our gay male friends don't know where they fit because they don't fit that stereotypical mold.
Yeah, I think that's, again, the shame thing where it's only shown as one thing, the flamboyant seaside of things. Again, it just goes down to stereotypes and because we haven't had that representation.
And how many times have we had people on the podcast telling their own journey saying they either didn't know they were gay because they didn't see anyone like them or they thought they were the only gay because they didn't see anyone like them,
Yeah.
you know? So it is really important to look at all pockets of a marginalized
spectrum.
group. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Look at the entire spectrum when you're going to build your characters and represent everybody in a very correct and positive way.
I think that also comes from the fact that, and I could be wrong because I don't know what sexuality the writers are on the shows, but I'd say 9 times out of 10, it's a straight person trying to write a queer baiting character.
Yeah, and look, let's be honest, pre-2000s, a lot of these hallmark lesbian relationships that were queer baiting just for like to grab some people in totally were written by men, and you can tell.
Oh, yeah.
Because it's such a superficial
relationship.
relationship.
You see it because it becomes the male gaze and their relationship, quote, I'm doing quotation marks for anyone who's not watching the video, quote unquote, made for the male gaze.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so since we've thrown in a few queer baiting shows that come to the forefront of our minds, let's talk about some of the early examples of queer baiting television.
Ooh.
Now, as we've said, it's post-2000s that the term queer baiting has really been branded as a marketing technique.
You know, I had no idea about like where it actually started.
Yeah.
I only, because, you know, me coming out later in life had only, like I've always seen it happen, but I've never really thought about where the term came from until recently.
Well, it really is only a recent term. Anything that was considered queer baiting that was pre-2000s wasn't really considered to be purposeful.
Right.
Until they realised that there was
They
a
could.
loud queer audience that were here to involve themselves in a fandom, whether the characters were actually together or not.
Yeah.
You know, so as I said, marketing technique for post-2000s, but in the earlier days, we definitely know that some of the writers and producers just flirted heavily with their characters being together, not together, you know.
Sure did.
So let's talk about one of the biggest franchises that every lesbian knows all too well. Do you want to have a stab?
Yeah. I think I know this one because in one of the previous episodes, I had already mentioned that this person was one of my gay awakening
Oh, yeah?
persons. So Xena and Gabriel.
Yes, you are correct. Xena ran from 1995 to 2001, and the relationship between Xena and Gabriel kept fans on the hook the whole time. The deep bond between the characters portrayed romance to many fans, and the writers played into this with emotional scenes, bed sharing, and plenty of innuendos. The creators of Xena knew exactly what they were doing, dangling a carrot to queer audiences, especially in a time where it was still quite a taboo subject in pop culture, and the cleverly written scenes always allowed the creators to maintain plausible deniability.
That's true. And I think you can see, even in the way, going back to that stereotype, you know, Xena is this big Amazonian woman with the armor and everything and quite like toned, muscly, and then Gabriel is quite feminine and everything. So you can see the relationship.
Definitely gave them
gay
stereotypical
vibes.
roles.
Yeah.
Yeah. But still maintaining that plausible deniability, like we said before. If anyone ever said, oh, is there homosexuality on your show?
No, they're just
Easily,
really,
no.
really good friends.
Yeah. However, the one thing that sets Xena apart is that in season 2, episode 13, titled The Quest, Xena and Gabriel actually even kissed. But the writers hid this behind a plot line. Xena had apparently entered the spirit world, quote unquote, and it was up to Gabriel to pass her spirit on, and she could only do this by a kiss. Sounds gay to me.
That's very gay.
Clever though, very clever
It's
way
a
to
clever,
hide it.
yeah, it's a clever way to
Keep queerbaiting.
Keep queerbaiting and to hide yourself, like, again, behind plausible deniability. But it wasn't actually a in-your-face queer moment.
No.
She was transferring to the spiritual world.
Funny, right? Okay, so from 1966 to 1969, the original Star Trek series has been said to have queer-baited a relationship between Kirk and Spock.
I've never watched it.
Yeah, no, I've never watched sci-fi, and I definitely didn't watch the original Star Trek.
My
But-
auntie has.
Oh, really?
Mhm, she's a big Star Trek fan.
I wonder what she thinks. Maybe she... Well,
You can ask her.
when you're not involved in
In
kind
the
of like
community, yeah.
you probably don't see it as much. But many fans believe that there was romantic subtext in their intense friendship. Now, at this time, like we said before, pre-2000s, it wasn't really a form of marketing like it is now or
Yeah.
like it was. At this time, it's highly doubtful that it was intentional queer baiting, being that it was the 60s, but later adaptations have definitely lent into the underlying potential for a relationship, especially where fan fiction and fan culture is at play.
Really?
Fan fiction is life. Just going to say that.
Nerd.
If you've never read a good fan fiction, you are not living.
What's the one? Oh, you keep telling me about the 100 fan fiction, which is also a queer coded baiting.
Oh, yeah. I mean, there was actually queerness though. But anyway, fan fiction is amazing. I don't read anything, but I'll read a good fan fiction about two characters that never actually got a chance in real life because it really like fills the hole that you are left.
I would read a fan fiction about, and I know you're going to laugh at me because I said this to you at the table, about Kim Possible and Shihiko.
Oh my God. Enough with the cartoons, Lauren. I would read a good fan fiction about Rizzoli and Isles.
There's many. I've found them.
She's already looked them up.
I've looked.
Okay, we're going to zoom into the 2000s where we slowly started to see actual representation emerge. Now, some shows still felt the need to bait the queers but never deliver.
This was so frustrating.
It is. But this was when queer baiting was more coined as the term.
Okay.
The LGBTQIA plus community was starting to really be recognised more than ever before and was a lot more socially acceptable, especially online. So media creators soon realised that it would be easy to draw the queer audience and keep them hooked, but due to corporate or cultural pressures still discouraged explicitly queer characters. So some notable examples where fans believe they were baited in a time where they believe queer stories could have lived.
Yeah.
Number one was in Smallville, which ran from 2001 to 2011, where Clark Kent and Lex Luthor had an intense chemistry and emotional intimacy that the show was happy to explore, but cut short of anything explicitly romantic.
If you fast forward to, Supergirl and DC things.
The same thing happened in the female version.
Okay, good.
Supergirl between Kara Zor-El and Lena Luthor. There was so much speculation and emotional intimacy between these characters.
Kara's Supergirl, for anyone who doesn't know that.
Yes. But the writers tried to make up for the lack of romantic intimacy by having other actual queer characters in the show, but I still don't think it quite filled the gap.
No, because I am 100% sure there's fan fiction about the Supergirl and Lena.
And fan art.
Yeah.
There's a lot of fan art, which does fill the void.
A little bit.
From first-hand experience. It fills
from
the
knowledge.
Void. Yeah. But you know what fills the void? Fan fiction. Also, this is a complete side note, but because you brought up The 100 before.
Oh, okay.
For anyone who watched The 100, just tying it into the Superman universe for a bit.
Oh.
I always thought that it was low-key connected because Clark and Lexa were the ship in The 100, relating to like Clark Kent and Lex Luthor.
I know what you're about to say now.
And then in Superman, the main city was Metropolis, and in The 100, Lexa lived in Polis, which they only called that because in the place it was like full devastation radiation. Half the sign was missing, so the metro part of the sign was gone. And I'm like, did anyone else ever think this? Or is that just like my nerd brain like having a spasm?
Your fan theory crap just went, bleh.
Yeah, I don't know.
But, okay, so, and who was the girls, Lexa and...
Clark.
Yeah. That's insane.
So, but like, I think I'm the only one who thinks that.
I don't know. You might have to do a Reddit dive to find out.
I did do a dive.
Oh.
Apparently there's no truth to it, but yeah, my nerd brain was like, oh my God, it's a crossover. But
that would be insane.
It wasn't. Anyways, that is a show that I really want you to
look. We'll have to watch that after we finish watching Rizzoli.
It's a show we really have to take apart for the lesbian death trope dedicated episode.
I know.
Which is going to be a hard one, but it'll be worth it.
I'm sad about that.
So I'm going to run through some smaller mentions of other TV shows that other people have thought that they had purposefully queer baited.
Yeah.
The next show was Merlin from 2008 to 2012. Apparently, Merlin and Arthur's relationship was deeply emotional and romantic in tone, while the show never explicitly confirmed any queerness.
I watched that, so
You get it?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the writers, actors, and even the promotional material often suggested more and teased that dynamic, but yeah,
it was
nothing
the
ever
same
delivered.
with like Morgana, because Morgana's played by the same person who plays Lena Luthor.
Yeah, Katie McGrath.
Yeah, Katie McGrath.
She's a babe.
She's such a babe.
She's on my list.
Yeah, her and the female counterpart to Merlin. Anyways,
I don't know.
Going back.
Oh, is she though? She married the Merlin guy in real life.
No, we went through this last time and she didn't actually marry him in real life.
Am I just saying the same thing? Okay, well, let's move on. In Supernatural, 2005 to 2020, between the main character of Dean and the angel Castiel.
Oh.
For over a decade, the show leaned into the fan theories about Castiel's sexuality but avoided any confirmation until the very last season.
I've never watched the show. My best friend and her mum have, like, they're avid fans. Mm-hmm. But yeah, never thought about that.
So apparently there was this really flirtatious relationship between Dean and Castiel.
Right.
And it only happened in the last season that they made Castiel actually like pour his feelings out for Dean. And of course they weren't reciprocated.
Right.
So it was like bait, 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 bait.
Bang.
Yeah, it was like, well, here's your love explosion, only not to be reciprocated.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah. And you know what is sad about that is I feel like Dean is stereotypically portrayed as like a man's man. And it would have been so nice to see that he was actually queer.
Yeah.
Because we don't
it's
see
different
that.
kind of representation.
Yeah, we don't see that.
I guess that's where you kind of when we went and watched Heart of a Man, you did get to see a bit of that more manly man
Yeah,
have
definitely.
that representation.
Okay, so the next show was Sherlock on the BBC.
Oh, yes.
Sherlock and John Watson's relationship was heavily queer-coded with constant insinuations of romantic subtext. But the writers constantly stopped any further conversations about sexuality with jokes and denials which infuriated fans.
I can imagine.
Okay, here's your next mention. Riverdale. While also eventually having queer characters, other storylines between certain characters were baited and promoted intentionally to lure queer audiences, specifically a promo where Betty and Veronica kiss.
Yep.
It got me, to be honest.
It got me too.
That promo got me, and then I started watching the show and I was like, what's this shit?
You're like, what is all this straight nonsense?
Yeah, I was like, I wasn't here for this. Okay, so let's go to movies. Movies like Star Wars, Rise of the Skywalker. The characters Finn and Poe shared strong emotional chemistry, and the actor Oscar Isaac openly discussed wanting their relationship to develop romantically, but ultimately the film chose to avoid any queer representation entirely.
Of course.
Except for a brief same-sex kiss between two minor characters.
Wow.
Yeah. Let's go to some J.K. Rowling. Trigger warning, I'm mentioning J.K. Rowling. Fantastic Beasts, The Crimes of Grindelwald. Now, this is kind of like, I don't understand where this woman comes from, but whatever.
I don't think she understands where she comes from.
JK had openly expressed many times that Dumbledore was an openly gay character and had a relationship with Grindelwald, which fans were expecting to see in the Fantastic Beasts film. But they were left frustrated when there was no visible representation whatsoever.
You do see in the films though, you do see the flirtationship of how things could have happened or how the queer baiting side of things is.
Flirtationship is such a beautiful word that you just said then, because that's exactly what all of this is.
Yeah.
It's just like the calm before the beautiful storm of what like a beautiful queer relationship could be on TV, you know? I think it's also really important to mention that queer baiting doesn't just happen in television and movies, but also with some of our favourite musicians.
Really?
Can I take you back?
Please do.
Close your eyes.
Ooh, oh, okay. Get me in
It's
the mood.
2003. The MTV Video Music Awards are on.
Damn.
You open your eyes and Madonna is standing on the stage and she just kisses Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera.
Yeah, that's constant.
Another moment I played on repeat.
Yeah, that's a constant brain.
If it wasn't on the TV, it was in my head while I'm sleeping.
It's also the you know what's very like queer I think it's Madonna and Britney again in the
where they're in like the maze.
Yeah.
And Me Against the Music.
Yeah, Me Against the Music. That's
queer baiting music video.
So queer. And then they recreated it in Glee with Britney, and then of course eventually in Glee it did become a relationship with Britney and Santana.
Yeah.
But still.
Crazy, right?
Yeah.
So queer baiting as a marketing tool was used here, like especially in music, but not to target a queer audience. It was more so for the coined phrase, no publicity is bad publicity.
Right.
So if you were a girl out kissing other girls and you wanted attention, you for sure got it because everyone was talking about it. Shock factor was the great publicity tool of this queer baiting.
Yeah, especially in the early 2000s era.
Early 2000s. Also, biggest queer bait band ever, Tattoo. Mm-hmm. They were only gay for pay. I know we've said this before, but...
Yeah, see, I didn't know that until you told me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I'd heard all the rumours, but I was hoping it was untrue, but it wasn't. But, yeah, what are you going to do? Pink's music video for Sober, where she makes out with herself. That's kind of fascinating.
I did not know that.
Did you not?
No.
I'm also like, how did they film that? And even all the way to just recently, Sabrina Carpenter and Jenna Ortega in Sabrina's music video for Taste.
That's true.
So we have been queer baited a lot, and maybe we just don't really recognize it and we don't know it.
Yeah. I think especially nowadays, back then it was more of a taboo thing.
Mm-hmm.
But now I think you see it even with celebrities as well, playing into the queer baiting side of things, where they just are like, well, I'm, again, gay for the pay, or gay to create some outrage so that I have this publicity drawing me in, but I'm not actually queer.
It's even, like you said before, with actors of a franchise, for example, Brittany Snow and Anna Kendrick holding hands on a red carpet because they know that queer audiences want to see that, but they have no promise to like deliver anything past that. And it's just like, I don't know if that's the right thing to do or the wrong thing to do. It's kind of giving your audience what they want, but at the same time, you're still not giving them what they want.
It's a false sense of hope, and that's where the problematic thing comes into it. It's a false sense of hope. Especially if you're in a vulnerable place as a queer person and you're seeing this, you're like, okay, this is representation, but what if I'll only ever get this if I act this way, or I'll only ever get this, but I'll have to be with this straight person or fall for this straight person because I can't actually be queer or openly queer.
Mm-hmm. The other queer baiting thing is in TV shows, sometimes they'll make a character queer for only a few episodes and then, that relationship doesn't work out and their sexuality is never explored again, kind of the same
The queer erasure.
Yeah, it is. It is. It comes under the same umbrella as the queer baiting. But besides Rizzoli and Isles, which is what we're being queer baited by at the moment, which brought this episode to light, do you have anything else that really stands out to you as something that has queer baited you?
It's not really a queer bait, but again, it touches on the fact where in Cruel Intentions, Sarah Michelle Gellar teaches Selma Blair's character how to kiss.
That's still queer bait, for sure.
And then I think Charmed probably had some queer baiting moments in there. I can't think off the top of my head, but
I feel like She's the Man with Amanda Bynes.
Oh, yeah.
You know, when she was like portrayed to date all those girls. All the girls, and it was like, and then, you know she's a girl dressed as a guy. So you're like, they're really playing into that. As a young teenager, loved seeing that kind of thing.
Yeah, actually, I think even in Aquamarine with Jojo and Emma Roberts.
Oh, yeah?
They're just really, really good best friends, but they can't live without each other when one has to move to Australia and they go on this adventure together and one gets jealous with this and that. And I'm like,
It's kind of like what we were talking about in our episode with Ali Morgan from Girl Crush.
Yeah.
How throughout our lives we can even have these like mini relationships with people that we don't realize are actually relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's exactly what queer baiting is, everybody.
Yeah.
And one really notable mention, just really quickly before we end this episode, just talking about in ways that I have been so queer baited, apart from Rizzoli and Isles, which we are still watching now.
We are, and I constantly every night get like sucked into the queer bait.
But one series that is so notable to mention is Killing Eve.
Oh, yeah. I didn't even think about that one.
Killing Eve baited us through season 1, season 2, season 3, finally delivered in season 4, and then so quickly took it away. Ugh. And I guess we'll also talk about that show in the Lesbian Death Trope episode.
I know, that Lesbian Death Trope episode. I think I need to have a refresher in my memory of the Killing Eve.
Oh, man, we've got so much to watch.
So much to watch. Not enough time.
No, never enough time. But yes, Killing Eve was definitely one to mention when we're talking about how I have been so queer baited in the past. That was definitely one that stands out the most.
Yeah.
So my biggest question that I want to leave everyone with today is, have you been queer baited, and what was the hook that queer baited you? Have a think and let us know, because there is a lot out there.
Yeah, I'm sure there is a lot. Like, on the top of my head, I can't think of any more that I've mentioned throughout the
You did mention
show.
Kim Possible and Shigo.
Yeah.
And I know you're like in your cartoon era. But I mean, it probably did still happen there.
Yeah. And that would have been hard for Disney.
Well, everyone have a think. Please let us know what baited you. What was the biggest hook? Did you take the bait or have you just been like a passenger?
Yeah.
Have you just been a passenger on someone else's like queer baited ride?
Just watch observing and not knowing.
Yeah. Well, I hope that everyone has enjoyed this episode. But for now, we're going to go and cook some beautiful food because we've got people coming over. So until next time,
I guess you better remember to stay gay, motherfuckers.
I'm talking about, you're talking about, we're talking about just gay stuff.
Thanks for joining us on another episode of Just Gay Stuff. Make sure to follow us at Just Gay Stuff Podcast on all your socials and write to us with your stories at justgaystuffpodcast@gmail.com.